Welcome back. Tanzanian civil rights groups are urging the International Criminal Court to investigate President Samia Suluhu Hassan for alleged post-election killings. The groups accuse her of authorizing violence against civilians. IntelWatch Executive Director Dr. Paula Cristina Roque joins us now for more. Dr. Roque, thank you so much for your time. So a number of civil society organizations, including yourselves as IntelWatch, are demanding accountability from the government of Tanzania. From your perspective, what are the key pieces of evidence or indicators that you suppose support the allegations of systemic violations and crimes against humanity? And how does IntelWatch evaluate the strength of the petition that you have with regards to high-level government officials, including the president, for the responsibility of these alleged atrocities?
Well, thank you so much for having me. We are collating evidence, and we're talking about thousands of pictures, thousands of videos, images, satellite images of mass graves. I mean, clearly there has been a pattern of systemic and organized and premeditated mass killings. So ultimately, the person that bears the ultimate responsibility is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, is the president. In this case, it's President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Now, we had already foreseen that this was going to be a difficult election. The opposition had been disqualified, arrested, put on treason, which would give them the death penalty if they were found to be guilty. We had seen her taking a very hard line beforehand. And when we saw that, I think they miscalculated. They understood that people probably wouldn't show up in the polls, but when they saw that there were mass protests, they began shutting down the internet and orders were given to start killing. Now, it wasn't the military, it was the police, it was uncommissioned intelligence officers under the command of President Samia. In fact, one of her own ministers, who had been the current ambassador to Cuba, Humphrey Polepole, from the ruling party, had been abducted and has disappeared. We believe he's been killed because he called out President Samia's son for leading a criminal group that would be repressive during the elections. So there was already an intent to clamp down. What we didn't expect was the level. So I am very confident in the evidence that we are gathering. We have investigations across the board with several international organizations, local human rights groups. The evidence, the video evidence speaks for itself. The images of bodies piled up in morgues is something that is, when you see it, it's unforgettable. And so we do believe we have a strong case.
And how challenging do you think it's going to be to hold a sitting head of state accountable within the framework of the international criminal justice?
Well, you see, even if nothing happens in terms of President Samia may be indicted, the case may fall apart, as was the case in the post-election violence in Kenya, when President Ruto, at the time he wasn't president, and Kenyatta was sent to the ICC to respond, but witnesses were killed and their court case fell apart. However, I know that President Samia lives in fear right now. She hasn't left her office for a long time since the election killings occurred. The military is unhappy. She feels isolated. There are AU, EU, and SADC meetings that she is not taking part. And so the psychology of feeling encircled and in siege, where you are in liability within your own government, within your own party, you become a rogue with other presidents that see you as a president that wasn't legitimately elected. All of the observation missions, including the African Union and SADC, did not say these elections were free and fair. We've had former presidents Thabo Mbeki and Ian Khama of Botswana say that she is illegitimate. So she is isolated. And internationally, if there is calls for her arrest, she won't be able to travel. And it doesn't matter, because I do believe she will not be able to last the next 5 years. There's a lot of pain in Tanzania. There's a lot of anger. People want to know what happened to their loved ones. They want to give the last rites to their children and husbands and nephews that were killed in the violence and disappeared. And so we have protests now organized for Independence Day on the 9th of December. And I think we are about to see mass protests again in Tanzania.
So, Doc, I mean, you say she's living in fear and hasn't left her office ever since. How is she fulfilling her presidential duties?
Well, she's governing, she's elected, she's pretending as if nothing happened. She continues governing. She's already brought in a cabinet. She's sending the vice president to the meetings. For example, the EU-AU meeting in Angola, the vice president has been sent. She has a prime minister that is now governing and is in charge of the executive. So she doesn't really need to be moving. She can govern in that sense, but it gives her restrictions. And we have no sense that the army is with her. So I think she feels, let me put into context. The elections were on the 29th of October. The killings happened over 3 days, 29th, 30th, and 31st. On the 1st of November, the army took to the streets. Now, the killings were done not by the army, but by the police and other non-commissioned groups. And the army took to the streets and they said they did peacekeeping. So the killings appeased and calmed down. So the army's not happy. And she needs to be very careful with what's going to happen. Because if there is another mass killing, another massacre in the next few weeks on the 9th of December, I don't know if the army will sit back this time and will not take over. So we also need to understand that what happened in Tanzania, if we're talking about 10,000 people killed in 10 days, we have seen a democratic backsliding that have given a lot of these repressive regimes almost the blank check to go and kill their people without any sense of accountability and justice. And that cannot happen. I mean, we're about to have elections in Uganda where we are going to see the exact same thing happen in January, where we will know that the opposition will be killed, persecuted, abducted, tortured. They already have been by President Museveni, who is becoming increasingly violent. So we need to act. And as NGOs and as wonderful human rights activists in Tanzania, in Kenya, in Uganda, just as we have transnational repression, we have a coalition of human rights activists that are incredibly brave, that are putting their lives on the risk to get the evidence out. That evidence is not fabricated. That evidence you cannot override. And that is what the truth is about. And so for those victims and those victims' families, this is very important.